My wife, Clara, is pregnant. We waited 10 years for this, and it finally happened. But there's one problem. I don't think the baby is mine. It started with little things easy to brush off, like that night in the living room. She was 7 months along, feet propped up on the ottoman, a half-finished mug of peppermint tea on the coffee table. We were watching this old movie, one of those 90s dramas, the kind with a lot of rain and sad piano music. In the story, the wife cheats on her husband and then finds out she's pregnant. The husband's clueless. The audience knows. It's messy. Clara was quiet at first, rubbing her belly the way she always does now. But the second the affair came out on screen, she tensed up. I felt her body go stiff beside me. Then, right as the husband confronts his wife, Clara says, "Can we change this, please? I don't like this kind of thing." I looked at her. "It's just a movie, babe. You love old dramas." She kept her eyes on the remote. "And not this one. It's depressing. Can we watch something funny?" I shrugged. "Sure. Are you okay?" She glanced at me real quick. "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just, I don't need that kind of stress. All this cheating and secrets. I don't want it in the house." I almost joked, "It's not contagious," but the look on her face eliminated it. She stared at the TV like she hated it. I could see her jaw working, grinding her teeth. I tried to play it off. "It's probably just hormones. You want me to make popcorn?" She nodded, but her face was tight, like she was holding something back. "Yeah, that'd be nice." So I went to the kitchen, made the popcorn. I brought her the bowl and sat back down, but she barely touched it. She just stared at the TV, now playing some goofy sitcom, like she was somewhere else entirely. But then, a week later, things got even weirder. We were at a neighborhood barbecue. Just a bunch of families in somebody's backyard, kids running around, country music playing, the smell of burgers and lighter fluid everywhere. It should have been an easy, normal Saturday. I was talking to a couple of guys about work and football, half listening, when suddenly this one guy, Mike, I think, starts telling a story. "So my cousin, right? He's been freaking out, thinks his wife cheated on him. Now he wants a paternity test for his kids," Mike says, half laughing, half shaking his head. A few people chuckle, but not Clara. She goes rigid beside me, tight as a drum. She jumps into the conversation, voice sharp, eyes cold. "Are you serious? That's insane. If he really loved his wife, he'd trust her. I mean, what kind of marriage is that? Making your own wife take a test like a criminal? That's just paranoia." Everyone gets kind of quiet. Mike just shrugs. "I don't know. I guess he wants to be sure." Clara won't let it go. "No, that's messed up. Some people just can't help themselves. They're always suspicious, always looking for something to be wrong. If you're always doubting your partner, maybe you shouldn't even be married." I looked at her, and something in her face made my stomach turn. It wasn't just anger. She looked cornered, almost scared, like she was fighting for her life. I said, "Hey, it's just a story of unknown guy. You okay?" She shot me a glare. "I just hate when guys act like that. Like women can't be trusted or something." Her voice was shaking. Her hand found mine and squeezed way too tight. I tried to play it cool, but my mind was spinning. This wasn't normal Clara. The way she snapped, the way she kept defending the wife in the story, I couldn't stop thinking about it. That's when I really started to wonder. The next day, I went out for a beer with my buddy Henry. We grabbed a booth at our usual spot, dark, sticky tables, some old rock song on the jukebox. I tried to act normal, but Henry can read me like a book. He takes one look at me, sips his beer, and goes, "All right, man, what's eating you?" I hesitated, then just blurted it out. "I don't know, dude. Something's off with Clara lately. She freaked out over a movie about cheating, then lost it at that barbecue when Mike told that story about his cousin wanting a paternity test. I can't shake the feeling there's something she's not telling me." Henry nodded, didn't say anything right away. Then he leaned in, serious. "Listen, if it's just once, maybe you're overthinking it. But when the same thing keeps bugging you twice, 3 times, that's not just in your head, man. That's real. People don't get that worked up unless they got something to hide." I stared at my beer, turning his words over. I wanted to believe I was just being paranoid. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like he was right. Henry clapped me on the back. "Look, bro, you gotta trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, there's probably a reason." I didn't say anything, just sat there, the noise of the bar fading out. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't want to turn into some paranoid psycho, so I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe Clara's just stressed from the pregnancy. maybe I'm losing my mind. But I couldn't let it go. A couple days later, I called up this guy I know. Eddie works for a security company. He's done some tech stuff for me before, nothing crazy. We met up behind his office after hours, both of us standing around like we were in some cheap spy movie. Eddie lit a cigarette and raised an eyebrow. All right, man. What's going on? I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling ridiculous. Listen, this stays between us, okay? I need to know what's going on with Clara. I can't ask her outright. She'll freak. I'm just worried about her. Pregnancy, you know? He smirked, then got all business. I got something. There's an app called Voice-Activated Recorder. You send a link to her phone, she clicks it. Bam, it's running. Every time she makes a call, it records both sides of the conversation. You'll get the files. She'll never know. I hesitated. Is that even legal? He shrugged. Let's just say you're trying to protect your family. She won't notice a thing. You want it or not? I sighed, nodding. Yeah, I gotta know. That night, Eddie texted Clara a link, pretending it was some stupid ad for a pregnancy tracker app. She clicked it without a second thought. The app was live. Next day, I went even further. I told myself it was just to ease my mind, but it felt shady as hell. I slipped a bug under the seat in her car, just a tiny GPS tracker. Now, every time Clara went anywhere, I got a ping on my phone. I kept telling myself I was just gathering facts, not going crazy. But in my gut, I already knew I was way past the line. The guilt was eating me alive. Every time Clara smiled at me, every time she touched her belly, I felt like I was hiding a knife behind my back. But on the surface, life rolled on. Clara dragged me from one baby store to another, excited about everything. Cribs, strollers, baby clothes with little ducks on them. I tried to act normal, but I was on edge all the time. One afternoon, we were in this overlit shop looking at bassinets. Clara was holding up two different ones, trying to decide. This one's cuter, right? She asked, grinning, eyes shining. Or do you think the pink one is better? I tried to focus. Whichever you want, babe. They both look good. She frowned. Come on, help me out. You barely even look excited lately. What's going on with you? I forced a smile. I'm just tired, Clara. Work's been hell. She put the bassinets down, hands on her hips. You've been off for weeks, not just today. Is it the baby? Are you scared? That hit me hard. I almost said something honest, but I swallowed it down. Nah, it's not that, I lied. I want this baby more than anything. She studied me, suspicious, but let it go. Later that night, we argued again, this time about painting the nursery. She wanted yellow. I thought it was too bright. It's cheerful, she said, waving a paint swatch. It's blinding, I snapped back. We're not raising a canary. She rolled her eyes. Fine. Let's do whatever you want, since apparently nothing I pick is ever good enough. We barely talked the rest of the night. When she went to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark, my phone buzzing with new audio files from her calls, my guilt twisting in my chest. But I had to know. Either I'd eliminated these doubts once and for all, or finally faced the truth. Because living like this, pretending everything was fine while my insides were on fire, was tearing me apart. The problem was, Clara loved to talk. I mean, really talk. Her phone calls with her friends, her mom, her coworkers. Sometimes they'd go on for hours. Seriously, I don't know how she did it. She'd be pacing around the house, belly out, phone tucked under her chin, talking a mile a minute. At first, I tried listening to everything, hoping I'd hear, I don't know, something. But Jesus, you ever try to get through hours of women talking about new hair color, sales on underwear, and who slept with whose cousin at the office? Pure torture. I swear you wouldn't last either. There were entire afternoons where all I got were updates about a crazy discount on maternity bras, or drama about some ex-coworker who ran off to be a nun after hooking up with her third cousin at a wedding. I'm not making this up. After a while, I was just begging for anything useful. But it was all just noise. Endless, pointless noise. And still, I kept listening, hoping I'd catch something that would finally give me an answer, one way or another. So I came up with a solution. There was no way I could listen to every single call. Clara talked too much for any human to survive that. So I downloaded all her phone conversations from the past week and ran them through ChatGPT. The program turned every call into text, line by line. Still a ton to read, but at least I didn't have to hear about shampoo sales in real time. It was way easier to skim, but still took forever. After a while, I realized I had to get smarter about it. So I set up red flags, keywords that might mean trouble, stuff like secret, cheating, don't tell, hotel, or any mention of a guy's name I didn't know. If any of those popped up, I'd stop and read the whole conversation. Otherwise, I just kept scanning, getting more tired and frustrated by the day. It was obsessive, I know, but I couldn't help it. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. A few days later, ChatGPT finally flagged something unexpected. Clara had a phone call with her sister Mindy, and their conversation triggered a couple of my red flag words. My heart started pounding the second I saw the notification. I typed fast, barely breathing. "Which day was this call? Show me the transcript." A few seconds later, ChatGPT replied, "This conversation took place on Tuesday. Here is the transcript." My hands shook as I scrolled down, dreading what I might find, but needing to know all the same. My eyes locked on the transcript, hands shaking as I read line by line. "Mindy, are you scared at all? Like, when the baby's born, what if David notices she doesn't look like him?" Clara, "No, I'm not scared. Seriously, don't worry. The biological dad looks almost exactly like David. Like, it's freaky. Same eyes, same hair, even kind of the same smile." Mindy, "Wow, that's lucky, I guess." Clara, "Yeah, no one's gonna suspect a thing. Honestly, sometimes I can't even tell looking at pictures." Mindy, "So you think you're safe with your secret?" Clara, "I know I am. David will never find out." I stared at the screen, my chest tight, every word sinking in like a knife. The room felt suddenly colder, smaller, like the walls were closing in. In that moment, my whole world shattered. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I'd felt it deep down, and I was right. Clara had cheated on me, and she was carrying another man's child. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely close the laptop. I couldn't breathe. I just knew I had to get out of the house before I did something stupid. I grabbed my jacket and walked straight out the front door. My head was spinning. As I passed by the nursery, the one we'd just about finished, the crib I'd built with my own hands just yesterday, my chest tightened up so hard I thought I might pass out. For a second, I wanted to go in there and smash everything, tear the place apart, turn that little crib to splinters. But I stopped myself. No amount of rage was going to change the truth. I stood in the hallway, fists clenched, breathing hard. I knew I had to keep it together. If I lost control now, nothing would get better. I needed to think, to plan, to figure out what to do next. I'd been betrayed, but I wasn't going to let anger destroy what little I still had. The next day, I sat across from a guy named Ray in a coffee shop downtown. He was in his 50s, wore a suit that didn't quite fit, and had that tired look of someone who's seen everything twice. Typical private investigator. Ray sipped his coffee and glanced at me. "So, you said you needed some help with your wife?" I nodded, voice low. "Yeah, her name's Clara. I think she's been cheating on me. I need proof, real proof. And I want to know who he is." Ray leaned forward. "You got any leads? Anyone you suspect?" I shook my head. "No one I know. She's been careful, but I just found out the baby's not mine." Ray whistled softly. "That's rough. All right, do you want pictures, texts? You want me to follow her?" "All of it," I said. "I just need the truth. And I need to know who he is. I can't sleep until I know." Ray nodded, scribbling in his notebook. "Okay, give me her schedule, where she works, who her friends are. I'll find him." I slid a paper across the table, hands still trembling. "Everything I know is right here. Can you start today?" He looked me straight in the eye. "I'll get you what you need, David. Just hang in there." I nodded, barely able to look him in the face. "Thank you, Ray. Just don't tell anyone." "Not yet." He stood up, buttoned his jacket. "Your secret's safe with me." "I'll be in touch." And just like that, I'd set something in motion I couldn't take back. 2 days later, Ray called me. I answered, barely breathing. "Hey, you got something?" Ray sounded almost apologetic. "David, I'm sorry, man. I followed her, checked her messages, watched everywhere she went. Nothing. She's clean. I couldn't find a thing." "Nothing? You're sure?" "Yeah. I double-checked everything. There's no sign of a guy. If she's seeing someone, she's hiding it better than anyone I've seen." I hung up, feeling even worse. For a minute, I wondered if I was losing my mind after all, but I couldn't let it go, not after what I'd read. When Clara went off for her maternity retreat at that spa place, I decided to handle things myself. I tore the whole house apart, drawers, closets, her nightstand, every bag and jacket, every folder in the office. I dug through the laundry, checked her laptop, flipped through her journals. I was desperate. I needed something, anything to prove what I already knew in my gut. The only place I hadn't checked was the storage closet, the one where we kept all the Christmas decorations. Clara loves Christmas. Seriously, she's obsessed. So we have a whole closet just for all the lights, ornaments, and fake snow. I figured, what the hell, might as well look. I pulled out boxes of tinsel, old stockings, plastic reindeer. Nothing. I even crawled up on a chair to check the top shelves. And then, as I was climbing down, I noticed something strange. One of the ceiling panels looked a little off. There was a gap at the edge, just enough to see it wasn't sitting right. My heart started pounding. I reached up and slid the panel to the side, felt around inside. My fingers brushed against something small, a box tucked way back, hidden where nobody would ever look unless they were desperate. I pulled it out, hands shaking. For a second, I just stared at it, afraid to open it and find out what Clara had really been hiding from me. I climbed down, clutching the box, and sat right there on the floor. My hands were sweating. For a second, I just stared at it, scared to know the truth, but needing to know even more. I took a deep breath and opened the lid. Inside were medical documents, folders, forms, and a stack of clinic papers. At first, I didn't get it. Then I saw the words, fertility center, IUI procedure, donor biomaterial. My chest tightened. I kept reading, flipping through page after page. Dates, signatures, all of it official. IUI, using a donor. So, Clara hadn't cheated on me. But the baby still wasn't mine. I just sat there, numb, the papers spread out in my lap. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she talk to me first? All those months of secrets, all that fear and suspicion, when she could have just been honest. I pressed my hands to my face and just sat there in the dark, surrounded by Christmas lights and the truth I never saw coming. But then I stopped cold. Wait, Clara told her sister the biological father looks just like me. How would she know that if the donor was supposed to be anonymous? My hands were shaking as I flipped through the clinic papers again, looking for something I'd missed. That's when I saw it. A line with the donor's name, right there in black and white, Brad Stanton. I just stared at it, frozen. Brad Stanton. I knew exactly who that was. Clara's stepdad. My mind went blank for a second. My whole body went cold. This was too much, way too much. I stumbled downstairs to the kitchen, grabbed the bottle of whiskey, and poured myself a glass, full, no ice. I swallowed it in one gulp, barely feeling anything except the burn. I just stood there, glass in hand, staring at nothing, not sure if I wanted to scream, cry, or put my fist through the wall. Brad Stanton was Clara's stepdad, her mom Audrey's second husband. I'd seen photos of Brad before, mostly old family pictures that Clara kept tucked in a dusty album on the living room shelf. I never paid much attention to them before, but now they came back to me clear as day. Brad was in his early 40s in most of the photos. He was a big guy, broad shoulders, long arms. His face had that strong, square jaw, same as mine. Same sharp cheekbones, same dark brown hair, though his was always a little messier than mine. Audrey already had 2 daughters from her first marriage, Clara and her sister Mindy. But Audrey and Brad always wanted a child of their own. They tried everything, or so Clara used to tell me. They even went so far as to donate and freeze their biomaterials, hoping for a miracle someday. But then Brad died, out of nowhere. That was 6 months before I ever even met Clara. Almost 10 years ago now. I remembered the story, how everyone said it was a freak accident. Brad was a serious hunter, always out at that cabin up in the mountains. He'd been doing it for 20 years. But one day he died cleaning his rifle. They said it went off by mistake. It never sat right with me, a guy that experienced making a rookie mistake like that. But there were no signs of foul play, so they ruled it an accident and closed the case. So now, Clara had used her dead stepfather's biomaterial 10 years after he was gone. What the hell? Why? Did her mother even know? It was too much, honestly. My head was spinning. Nothing about this made sense. Who would even think of something like this? I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty whiskey glass, feeling more lost and alone than ever before. I called Ray again, my hands sweating so bad I almost dropped the phone. He picked up right away. David, didn't expect to hear from you so soon. What's up? I took a deep breath, barely able to keep my voice steady. Ray, I need your help again. This time it's different. He sounded wary. What kind of different? I tried to find the right words. You know how I asked you to look into Clara's affair? Well, forget that for a second. I found something. Turns out the baby's biological father, it's not some mystery guy. It's Brad Stanton. There was a pause. Who's Brad Stanton? I swallowed. Clara's stepdad. He died about 10 years ago. Apparently, he and Clara's mom tried all kinds of fertility stuff. Freezing biomaterials, the works. Clara used his donor material for the pregnancy. I found the paperwork. It's legit. Ray went dead silent. Then finally, Jesus. So he's, what, gone? And now his biomaterial gets used years after the fact? I've never heard anything like that. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, but here's the thing. I want you to look into Brad's end. It was called a hunting accident, but something about it never sat right with me. As I heard, he was experienced, careful, and yet he died cleaning his rifle. I have a feeling there's more to it. Ray let out a long breath. All right, David, that's definitely not your everyday case. I'll dig around, see what I can find about Brad Stanton and how he died. I'll be in touch. Thanks, Ray. I just need to know what really happened. We hung up. Even Ray sounded rattled, and if this shook him, a guy who'd seen it all, then maybe I wasn't so crazy after all. I wasn't just going to sit around and wait either. I decided to drive out to the old cabin in the woods, the same place where Brad died. The road out there was rough and lonely, winding through miles of trees. About halfway there, I spotted a man walking along the shoulder. He looked like he belonged to the woods. Thick flannel shirt, heavy boots, long gray beard, like an old lumberjack straight out of a storybook. His face was weathered, eyes sharp. I slowed down, rolled down my window, and called out, "Hey there, is this the road to the Stanton place?" He barely glanced at me, didn't say a word, just turned off suddenly, disappearing down a narrow path into the trees. It was weird, honestly. For a second, I wondered if I was imagining things. Weird. I shook it off and kept driving. When I finally reached the cabin, it was clear nobody had been there in years. The windows were coated in dust, spiderwebs hung in every corner, and the whole place smelled like old wood and forgotten memories. My footsteps echoed on the floor as I walked inside, each creak making the silence even heavier. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, feeling like I was being watched by ghosts. I searched the entire cabin, every drawer, every closet, even under the floorboards in the bedroom. Nothing. The place was just as empty as it felt. Night came fast out there. I decided to stay. After all, I'd driven all this way. I decided to light the fireplace, stepped outside for some firewood, and out of nowhere, spotted a faint light in the woods. Someone actually lived out here? Maybe it was the forest ranger. If so, maybe he knew more about what happened here 10 years ago. I turned on my phone's flashlight and headed toward the glow. There was no path, just thick bushes and tall grass scratching at my jeans. Eventually, I pushed through to a small clearing. There was an old log cabin, pile of chopped wood, rusty bicycle leaning against the wall. Nothing fancy, but it was all neat, like someone actually cared. The window threw out the glow of a real fire. Someone was in there. I stepped up on the porch, the boards creaking under my boots. That's when I heard it, a branch snapping behind me. I spun around, tool barrel, right in my gut. Same old man I'd seen before, back on the trail. Wild eyes, white beard, not saying a word. I raised my hands. Easy, I'm not here to rob you, I said, keeping my voice flat. My family's got a house down the road. I'm just staying a couple nights. Name's David. He didn't answer, didn't blink. He just jabbed the barrel sideways, sharp, making his meaning clear. Move. I didn't argue. Fine, I said, backing up. Didn't mean to bother you. Still nothing. Just those hard eyes. All right, I'm going, I told him, louder this time. You have a good night, sir. I turned and crashed back into the woods, heart beating through my ribs. When I finally got back to my place, I shook my head. Idiot. What were you thinking? I muttered. Back at my cabin, I built a fire in the old stone fireplace, poured myself a mug of strong tea, and dropped into the armchair, staring at the flames, the whole time hearing that click of the tool in my mind. That's when I noticed something just above the mantel. Where the stone met the wooden paneling, there was a tiny gap, like someone had pried the wood loose and jammed it back in place. I reached up, felt around, and my fingers hit something soft and crinkly. I pulled out a thick stack of yellowed envelopes, all tied together with a piece of old blue ribbon. My hands shook as I opened the bundle and sat cross-legged on the rug. I started reading. The first letter was probably Brad's handwriting, blocky, all caps, a little messy. But the words inside made my stomach turn. My sweet Clara, I can't stop thinking about last weekend. Every time I close my eyes, I see you. I wish we could be together, really together, without having to hide anymore. Being around Audrey is torture. I love you. I wish things were different. But the next was in Clara's neat, careful print. Brad, sometimes I feel like we're living in a dream. I know it's wrong, but when you hold me, nothing else matters. I miss you. See, I kept reading. The letters spanned years. Whispers, promises, secret rendezvous at the cabin, plans to run away that never happened. You're the only person who really knows me, Brad. Please don't leave me. C. Let's meet again at the cabin. I can't stand being apart. Tell me you love me. B. I stopped, my heart pounding, hands numb. They'd had a full-blown affair, right under Audrey's nose for who knows how long. My wife and her own stepfather. God, what else didn't I know about Clara? That night, I drank myself to sleep. Couldn't help it. My mind was on fire. Questions pounding in my skull. Everything I thought I knew about my life falling to pieces. Morning broke hard. My phone was buzzing on the coffee table. The detective. David, I've got something. Meet me in town. We met up in a little cafe on the edge of town. Ray looked tired, like he'd been up all night. He slid a phone across the table. I got something you need to hear, he said, voice low. It's a recording of your wife and her mom. My mouth was dry. I put in the earbuds and hit play. First, it was Clara's voice, shaky and scared. Clara, what if David finds out, Mom? What if he figures out the baby's from Brad? Then Audrey, calm and steady. She sounded almost reassuring. Audrey, he won't find out, honey. It'll be all right. You're David and my Brad. They look enough alike. No one's going to question it. I just want you to have a family, Clara. I want you to finally know what it means to be a mother. You did the right thing. There was a pause, a little static. I could hear Clara sniffling. Clara, but I feel guilty, Mom. Audrey, you did what you had to do. He doesn't need to know the details. This is your chance. Don't ruin it by overthinking. My stomach dropped. I pulled the earbuds out, just staring at Ray. He just nodded, sympathy in his eyes. You okay? But I couldn't answer. All I could think was, there was no bottom to this pit. Every time I thought I'd hit it, there was another layer of secrets underneath. Finally, I looked at Ray, my voice barely above a whisper. There's more. I found something at the cabin. Letters. Clara and Brad. They had a full-on affair. It seems that Audrey didn't know. She thought Brad was faithful all those years. Ray leaned back, rubbing his jaw. You sure Audrey didn't know? What if she did? If she found out about the affair, maybe that's why Brad died so suddenly. I stared at him. You really think? He shrugged, eyes sharp. If she knew they were sleeping together, if she felt betrayed enough, hell, it might explain the accident in the woods. But how do we prove it? 10 years is a long time. Evidence disappears, memories fade. I felt a shiver run down my spine. There might be one person who remembers. When I went to the cabin, I ran into this old guy, looked like a woodsman, long gray beard, didn't say a word to me, just disappeared into the trees. If he's lived out there all this time, maybe he saw something. Maybe he knows. Ray leaned forward, interest suddenly sparked. It's a long shot, but I'd say it's worth finding him. Guys like that, they notice everything. You remember where you saw him? I nodded. Yeah. Right off the old logging road, before the turnoff to the cabin. I stood up, heart pounding again. I'll talk to him by myself. For the first time in weeks, I felt something besides dread. Maybe, just maybe, we were getting closer to the truth. I went back to the cabin the very next day. The woods were thick with morning mist, sunlight barely filtering through the trees. I parked by the old trailhead and started walking, calling out a few times, not even sure what I was looking for. I almost missed him. He was sitting on a fallen log just off the path, half hidden by brush. That long gray beard, plaid jacket, heavy boots. He looked exactly the same as before, part of the forest itself. I stepped closer, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, I'm David. We met yesterday. He didn't answer, just stared at me, silent and unmoving. For a second, I wondered if he might be mute, or just didn't want to deal with strangers. I tried again. Listen, I know you don't know me, but I need help. I'm trying to understand what really happened at this cabin. 10 years ago, Brad Stanton died here. Maybe you remember? Nothing. He just kept those steady eyes on me, face unreadable. Desperate, I decided to lay it all out. I took a deep breath and started at the beginning. My wife's name is Clara. We tried for years to have a baby, 10 years. We wanted it more than anything. But when she finally got pregnant, I looked down at my hands, forcing myself to keep going. I found out she was lying to me. She'd used donor material to get pregnant. The biological father isn't some stranger. It's Brad. My wife had a baby using her stepfather's DNA. She kept it a secret, made me believe the kid was mine, because when he was alive, they'd had an affair. Not just once, for years, right under her mother's nose. I found these letters, hidden in cabin, letters between Clara and Brad. Stephen's face didn't change. He just waited, so I pressed on. But that's not all. Brad's dead, has been for almost 10 years. They called it a hunting accident, said he was cleaning his rifle and it went off. But the more I found out, the less sense it made. I started digging, and what I found, what I heard, made me think maybe it wasn't an accident at all. Maybe there was more to it. My voice cracked. I don't know who to trust. My whole life feels like a lie. I came out here looking for answers, or maybe just someone who'd listen. I stared out at the lake, not sure I had anything left to say. I'm sorry, I know this sounds insane, but it's all true. I just needed someone, anyone, to hear it. When I finally ran out of words, the silence between us was heavy, thicker than the woods all around. Stephen didn't move a muscle, just let my confessions settle in the still morning air. Then finally, he stood up. He pointed, then motioned for me to follow. We walked through the trees in silence, my boots crunching on the pine needles, his steps soft and sure. He led me down an old path, winding through the underbrush, until we reached the edge of a quiet lake, still and glassy, tucked away from the world. He stopped at the water's edge and turned to face me, as if what he was about to show me or say would change everything. We stood at the edge of that silent lake, the early sun turning the water to silver. For a long moment, the old man just stared out across the ripples like he was weighing the whole world. Then finally, he spoke, his voice low and rough, the words coming slow, like he was dragging them up from deep inside. My name's Stephen, he said, his tongue thick, like the act of speaking hurt. Ain't said it out loud in a long time. He paused, working his jaw, eyes never leaving the water. 20 years, that's how long I've been out here. Don't talk to folks. Don't want to. Not after what I seen. I listened, hardly breathing, afraid to break the spell. Stephen stared out over the water, shoulders sagging as if the weight of 2 decades pressed down on him. My wife. He swallowed hard, struggling to get the words out. She was everything to me. We got together in high school. Sweethearts, you know. I thought we were building a life, a real one. He went quiet, jaw tight, like every word was a fight. But I missed what was right in front of me. She was seeing someone. For years, I figured it was just some neighbor or a guy from town. He let out a shaky breath. Turned out it was my own father. My blood. His voice broke. I found out by accident, came home one night, saw the lights on in the old barn, laughed to myself, thinking maybe she was planning some surprise. I opened that door and he covered his mouth, tears shining in his eyes. It was them, my wife and my father, in my own home. He shook his head, unable to meet my eyes. You ever feel the whole world just fall out from under you? That's what it was. Not just betrayal, not just heartbreak. Like something inside you just died. He looked back at the lake, voice barely a whisper. I couldn't stay. I didn't want to see their faces, didn't want to hear a single word. People found out, and then it was all pity and whispers. I left that night, walked into these woods, and never went back. Haven't spoken to a soul since. He rubbed his hands together, breathing deep. That's why I don't talk. That's why I don't trust. Some wounds don't heal. Some things you just survive. And that's all. He let out a long, shaky breath. Kept my silence all these years. Never told a soul. Figured it was better that way. He turned and looked right at me for the first time, and there was something raw and honest in his eyes. But you came out here with the truth, pain in your face. You're not the first to have your life tore up by lies. He hesitated, as if fighting himself, then nodded toward the cabin across the lake. That night, when Brad died, I was nearby. I saw things, heard things I ain't never told. He paused again, almost apologetic, like breaking his long silence was some kind of betrayal. I kept quiet, like always, but you deserve to know what really happened. Stephen drew a shaky breath, as if the memory itself hurt to drag up after all those years. I never planned to see anything that night, he said quietly. Sometimes I'd come down from my shack, walk around the lake, just to feel like I was still part of the world, you know? It was late, but the cabin lights were on. I could hear voices, arguing, sharp. A man and a woman. He looked at me, his eyes haunted. It was Brad, and a woman. At first, I couldn't see who it was, so I just stood in the shadows and listened. She was shouting at him, accusing him of something, of having a relationship with a girl. Kept calling him a liar. She was furious, David. I never heard a person sound so betrayed. Stephen's hand shook as he remembered. She kept pushing him, poking him in the chest, calling him disgusting, telling him she knew everything. Then he fired back, told her not to take him for a fool, said he knew about her affair too. She flared up. What the hell are you talking about? He said it word for word. I know you're having an affair with Rick Carter. Rick Carter, I repeated quietly, trying to lock in the name. I'd heard it somewhere before, just couldn't place where. So, they were both cheating on each other? Looks that way, Stephen nodded. They kept yelling, throwing accusations back and forth. Then Brad told her to calm down, to forget all this, start over. But she wouldn't let it go. She said she'd never forgive him. Stephen swallowed, looking down. Then, things got physical. She slapped him, hard, pushed him toward the fireplace. He stumbled. Next thing I know, she picked up his rifle. He must have been cleaning it earlier. It was still there by the wall. She started screaming again, waving the thing at him. Stephen's voice got even quieter. Brad tried to grab the rifle away from her, but she yanked it back. I don't know if she meant to do it or if it just happened in the heat of the moment, but suddenly there was a shot, just one. It echoed off the lake. It scared the birds out of the trees. He was silent for a long time. She dropped the rifle, stood there in shock, staring at what she'd done. Then she ran out the back door, vanished into the woods. I felt the air go out of my lungs. Did you see her face? Stephen nodded. He called her Audrey. He let out a long, ragged breath. I kept my silence, like always. I told myself it wasn't my place. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe you deserve to know the truth after all. Before I left the lake, I made Stephen promise, really promise, that he'd give a statement to the police. For the sake of all the betrayed husbands, to set things right. He nodded once, heavy and slow, like he knew the weight of what he was agreeing to. I met up with Ray, my detective, in his office. I walked in with a heavy folder and shut the door behind me. Ray looked up, eyebrow raised. You look like hell, David. I dropped the folder onto his desk. You would too, if you'd lived my week. He opened the folder, sifting through the stack of the love letters between Clara and Brad, the medical documents showing the donor, the phone call between Clara and Audrey. Ray nodded, spreading the evidence out, scanning the top page. Looks solid. I took a deep breath. I'm doing it, Ray. I'm filing for divorce, but that's not all. Brad's end. It wasn't an accident. Audrey confessed. Stephen, the guy from the woods, he saw it. She needs to answer for what she did. Stephen's ready to testify. That might not be enough to reopen the case, Ray said, rubbing his chin. But it's worth a shot. I want justice, I said without hesitation. For Brad. For me. For all of it. Ray nodded again, sliding the stack of evidence back toward me. All right, let's go put this nightmare to bed. I drove to the police station. I told the officer at the desk that I had new evidence in the Brad Stanton case. My name's David Miller. I need to report a homicide. I have evidence and a witness. He led me in to meet Sheriff Tomlin. When I explained why I'd come, the sheriff didn't rush to respond. The case was closed a long time ago. I'm not sure one recluse's testimony, without real evidence to back it up, is enough for the DA to reopen it. Excuse me for saying this, but what if the original investigation was sloppy? I doubt it. Brad Stanton's case was handled personally by the sheriff at the time, Rick Carter. I froze. Rick Carter? Did I hear you right? That's correct. Why does that surprise you? Brad's wife, Audrey, was having an affair with Rick Carter. At least, that's what I've been told. The sheriff went silent. I could see distrust in his eyes, doubt, and a flicker of dread at the kind of mess Stephen's testimony might stir up. Sheriff Carter retired 3 years ago. If I'm right, he might have covered up Brad Stanton's end to protect Audrey, covering up a crime she committed. Do you realize what you're saying? All I'm asking is that you take a statement from someone who saw everything with his own eyes. Just check it out. If it turns out to be nothing, fine. But if it's real, Brad's butcher is still out there. And she needs to answer for what she did. The sheriff hesitated. All right, give me your witness's contact info. I'll pull the file, but for now, keep this to yourself. Thank you. One thing was done. Now I had to file for divorce. That same day, Sheriff Tomlin went digging through the archives, pulling every scrap from Brad's case, crime scene logs, the old photos, the autopsy report. He took it all home and spread it across his kitchen table, going over every page until the words blurred. Right off the bat, things didn't line up. The coroner's report clearly listed 2 firearm wounds in Brad's body, but the original police file only mentioned one, the shot everyone claimed Brad fired into himself. The report didn't even mention a second bullet, and according to the files, it was never recovered. That kept nagging at Tomlin. The next morning, he drove out to the old cabin. He traced the walls inch by inch, just in case, and there it was, a tiny entry hole in the wood behind where Brad's body had been found. He pried back a loose board and, after 10 long years, found a battered old slug lodged deep inside. He sent it straight to the new crime lab for analysis. With today's tech, the forensic team could check for the tiniest traces of organic material, blood, tissue, whatever might have clung to the bullet after it tore through a human body, even after all this time. But Tomlin wasn't finished. Something kept gnawing at him, like there was still more buried in that house. He went back inside Brad's old place. He started going through the shelves, pulling down stacks of old books, most of them falling apart at the edges. He almost missed it. Tucked between 2 moldy paperbacks, there was a stack of loose photos, yellowed with age. Right on top, a faded Polaroid, the date stamped clear as day, the day Brad died. In the picture, Brad had his arm around Audrey. She was smiling, bundled up in a green wool coat. Tomlin paused, staring at that coat. Something about it felt important, like it was trying to tell him something. He didn't stop searching. Up in the attic, wedged in a box beneath old Christmas lights and water-stained books, he found it, the green coat, balled up and crusted with dust. He sent it straight to the lab for a full analysis. A week later, the lab results were in. The first thing, the bullet had definitely passed through Brad. This wasn't just a stray shot, and it sure as hell wasn't an accident. Someone had fired twice. And the second? Audrey's coat. The forensics team went over every inch, and this time they got a hit. Firearm residue, clear as day. Tiny flecks of gunpowder, lead, antimony, and barium all ground into the fibers right around the left sleeve. Tomlin had them run a chemical comparison, matching the residue from the coat to test shots fired from the homicide weapon, which, against all odds, was still sitting in evidence storage after all these years. The results left no doubt. The chemical makeup was a match. The bullet from the cabin wall, the bang residue on Audrey's coat, and the homicide weapon all pointed to the same story. Brad had been shot twice, and Audrey had fired one of those shots. For Sheriff Tomlin, that was the turning point, the moment the whole cover-up began to fall apart piece by piece. A week later, Sheriff Tomlin called me. Come down to the station. There's news. I had a good feeling. When I walked into the sheriff's office, he gave a silent nod for me to sit. He was focused on a stack of papers in front of him. You were right, he said finally, sitting back and setting the papers aside. The accidental end case was fabricated. The investigation wasn't done properly. Sheriff Carter will be held accountable. What's he looking at? I asked. Most likely he'll be charged with several counts: obstruction of justice, official misconduct, and perjury. He's facing serious time. And Audrey? We took a statement from the witness you gave us. Stephen, I said. Yes, Stephen. And the new investigation also proved it was her who shot Brad. She'll be charged with homicide. There will be a trial. Just then, I got a message from Clara. It's started. See you soon. Love you. Well, it was time to put an end to all the lies. I have a favor to ask, I said quietly. Can you wait 1 hour before you make the arrest? Sheriff Tomlin frowned. Why? I'm asking you. Just this once. After all, I helped you set things right. He hesitated, then nodded after a long pause. When I walked into Clara's hospital room, she was lying in bed, cradling the newborn. Audrey, the proud grandmother, stood by her side. "Hi, Daddy." Clara smiled at me. I stood in the doorway, unmoving. Clara frowned. "Don't you want to hold your daughter?" I managed a tight smile. "Daughter?" I said, clear and steady. "I'm not about to sign a paternity fraud." Clara stared at me. "What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what it means?" I took a shaky breath. "I know about the donor, about Brad." Clara's smile faded. Fear flickered in her eyes. "David," I cut her off, my voice gentle but unwavering. "You should have told me. I deserved the truth from the start." She looked away, her voice trembling. "I just wanted us to have a chance. I wanted a child so badly. It was our dream, remember? I didn't want to lose you." My voice was quiet, heavy. "But you lied to me, for months. You let me believe this was our baby." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't want to hurt you. I was desperate. You were everything to me, David." Audrey stepped forward, her voice soft but strained. "We all make choices when we're desperate. Sometimes we do the wrong thing for what we think is the right reason, but we're family." I looked at Clara, pain and anger twisting in my chest. "I would have stood by you if you'd trusted me with the truth, but this isn't family. This is betrayal." Clara buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, the excitement of the day now poisoned by the truth. That's when Audrey decided to step in. "You're wrong, David," she said, trying to sound firm. "She's your wife, and she fixed a problem you couldn't." I let out a laugh. "Oh, I'm sure you're an expert at fixing problems, Audrey. But this time, you screwed up." She went silent, clearly not understanding what I meant. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sheriff Tomlin. "We're ready, Sheriff." Audrey opened her mouth to ask what the hell was going on. But right then, 2 officers walked into the room, with Sheriff Tomlin behind them. "You're under arrest for homicide and giving false testimony," the sheriff said, his voice cold and official. Clara looked around helplessly, clutching the newborn to her chest. "Mom, what's happening?" "Your mother eliminated your lover because she was jealous of him being with you, and also because he exposed her own affair with the sheriff back then." "What?" Clara whispered, barely able to get the word out. Clara sat up sharply, staring at her mother in shock. "You eliminated him? Mom, is it true?" Audrey's face crumpled, her voice breaking. "I couldn't forgive him, Clara. He betrayed me, betrayed all of us. I did what I had to do." Clara shook her head, tears streaming, horror and grief twisting her face. "How could you? How could you do that? He was... Her breath caught, panic rising. "Mom, how could you? I was protecting our family," Audrey managed to say just as the officers led her away. Suddenly, Audrey broke free, shoving past the nurses. "Stop!" the officers shouted, giving chase, radios crackling. She darted through the hallways, panic pushing her faster. She rounded a corner, nearly knocking over an elderly patient, then shoved a medication cart out of her way, scattering vials and gauze across the floor. Alarms went off at the nurses' station. Audrey burst through a set of double doors, desperately searching for an exit. She ran down a stairwell, but her foot slipped. She missed the last steps and crashed down, landing hard. She let out a cry, grabbing her ankle. Within seconds, the officers were on her. One knelt, cuffing her wrists as she struggled. "You're under arrest, Audrey Stanton," the cop said, reading her rights as she lay there, breathing hard, her face twisted in pain and rage. Staff and patients stared as the officers hauled her to her feet, her ankles swollen, her dignity in ruins. The chaos faded as they led her away. I looked at Clara, still crying, and felt nothing for her. "I'll see you in court," I said, flat, and walked out. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was cold, the kind of place where nobody smiled and every word echoed off the walls. I sat at the petitioner's table, my lawyer beside me, stacks of documents and evidence lined up neatly in front of us. Clara came in late, holding baby daughter. She looked tired and nervous, but there was a kind of desperate hope in her eyes. When her name was called, she marched right up, cradling the baby like a shield. She shot me a look that was half pleading, half defiant. The judge looked over his glasses at both of us. "This is the case of Miller v. Miller regarding divorce and petition to establish non-paternity, Mr. Miller. You are requesting to dissolve the marriage and be relieved of all parental responsibilities and child support. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, voice steady. "I have provided DNA evidence, testimony, and documentation to support my case. I am not the biological father." My attorney stood, stating for the record, "We also move to admit as evidence The statements regarding fraud, misrepresentation, and emotional distress, as well as evidence related to criminal matters outside the scope of this hearing. Clara's lawyer tried to object. Your Honor, my client requests the court's understanding. She believed she was acting in the best interest of her family. She's asking for joint custody and appropriate support. But Clara couldn't hold back. She cut her lawyer off, raising her voice. David, please, this is your daughter. How can you just walk away? Don't do this! The baby started crying, the sound bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. Clara's face crumpled in panic and anger. I stood up, every eye in the room on me. With all due respect, Your Honor, I have been lied to, deceived, and manipulated. The child is not mine. I was never given a choice. I asked the court to recognize that and relieve me of any and all financial and legal responsibility. The judge held up a hand, silencing the room. Miss Miller, the evidence before me is overwhelming. You withheld material facts, you acted without your husband's knowledge or consent, and you misrepresented the child's paternity to this court and to Mr. Miller. He turned to me. Mr. Miller, the court finds you are not the biological father. You are hereby released from all obligations of child support, custody, and parental rights regarding the minor child. The divorce is granted. All claims of fraud and misrepresentation are preserved for any further civil action you may wish to pursue. Clara broke down sobbing, clutching the baby to her chest. She tried to get to me, but the bailiff stepped between us. As the judge banged the gavel, it was finally, officially over. I walked out of that courtroom feeling empty but free. The criminal trial of Audrey Stanton was held 6 months after her arrest. The courtroom was crowded, everyone tense, media, attorneys, and witnesses, all waiting for the truth to finally be aired. Audrey sat at the defendant's table, her face pale, hands trembling. Her attorney leaned in, whispering strategy. Across the aisle, the prosecutor's table was stacked with evidence. Stephen, the woodsman, who took the stand in his old flannel shirt, told the jury what he'd seen that night. I saw Mrs. Stanton and Brad fighting. She accused him of betraying her, called him names, pushed him. Then she picked up his rifle. There was a struggle. The tool went off. She ran away. Clara was next, holding her baby, her voice shaking but determined. I never knew about what happened to Brad until David discovered the truth. I loved my stepfather, but what my mother did, it destroyed our family. I just want my daughter to grow up with honesty, not secrets. When it was Audrey's turn, she stood with help from her attorney. Her voice was cracked, her tone defensive but desperate. I was betrayed by the man I loved. I found out he was sleeping with my daughter. I confronted him. I didn't mean to eliminate him. It was an accident. I lost control, yes, but I am not a butcher. The prosecutor was relentless. You left the scene, Mrs. Stanton. You hid the truth for 10 years. You let your family live with a lie. That is not the action of someone acting in self-defense or by accident. That is the action of a guilty conscience. After closing statements, the jury took only a few hours to return with their verdict. The judge's voice was steady, final. Mrs. Audrey Stanton, you have been found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. This court sentences you to 12 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 8. May this verdict bring some measure of truth and closure to all involved. Audrey broke down as the bailiff led her away. Clara wept silently, clutching her child. Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting, and for the first time it felt like the shadows were finally lifting. The court found former Sheriff Rick Carter guilty of obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and misuse of power. He was sentenced to 12 years in state prison, stripped of his pension, and permanently barred from holding any public office. I never saw them again after the trial. Not Clara, not Audrey, not Mindy, not even the baby. Still, in a small town, you hear things. Snippets of gossip at the grocery store, rumors drifting through old friends. People said Clara raising a child alone, trying to rebuild after all the lies and wreckage. I heard she moved in with her sister for a while, tried to start over, but nothing seemed to stick. Some said the baby had health problems. Some said Clara barely left the house anymore. Audrey, of course, was behind bars, and Mindy was left trying to hold the pieces together. But it turned out this story wasn't over for me yet. One day I was driving home from work when suddenly an SUV with tinted windows cut me off. I swerved hard onto the shoulder and barely managed to stop before hitting the guardrail. 2 huge guys, each close to 6.5 feet tall, got out of the SUV. They both had tools in their hands. One of them yanked open my door, grabbed me, and dragged me out. Listen up, a-hole. You're in serious trouble. You messed with the wrong people. I felt the cold steel of a pistol pressed into my gut. Today, you're going to do exactly what we say. Or tomorrow, your family's going to be picking out a coffin. Got it? I swallowed and nodded silently.